A good boy, that's what she called me when I slid the folder across the marble countertop. Right there in the house I poured a decade of sweat and sacrificed weekends into, while she hosted brunches with women who couldn't tell the difference between solid walnut and cheap veneer. It's finally official, she declared, holding up a glittering wine glass as if she'd just conquered a nation. Ladies, we own this place. Cheers! Laughter erupted, followed by the clinking of discount crystal. I stood by the door in a shirt that still smelled faintly of paint from when I'd retouched the guest bedroom. She had wanted it done in sage, not the puke green I had apparently chosen. I was a quiet presence, watching the smirks ripple across their faces like they were passing around a secret joke that hadn't reached me yet. And maybe it hadn't. Not entirely. But what none of them noticed, somewhere between the second bottle of Chardonnay and her friend Jessica's story about manifesting hardwood floors, was that the paper I signed wasn't the simple warranty deed she believed it was. It looked like one, and in a way, it was. But buried under Section 3A, footnoted under grant or discretionary conditions, and indexed against a separate master file lodged with the Marston Private Trust Registry, was a dormant clause. It was a clause I had drafted years ago, back when she still pretended to love me, and long before I stopped pretending to believe her. That clause was quiet, technical, and utterly boring to someone who bragged about skipping every docu-sign and letting James, the lawyer, handle it. It was a clause that granted me full reversionary rights in the event of malicious misrepresentation of contribution value tied to ongoing shared assets. Her lawyer, of course, had missed it. He was too busy golfing with her father. She had initialed every single page between mascara touch-ups and arguments about whether the backsplash was too coastal. It's funny how quickly people label you as weak when you're quiet, and how loud they become when they believe they've won. She waved the papers in the air like a trophy. It's done, she beamed, turning to her phone camera. I could already imagine the caption. Manifested this house. Signed, sealed, owned. To be fair, she almost had it. The public thought so. Her friends thought so. Even our mutual accountant, bless his underpaid, overworked soul, thought I'd finally given up and just let her have the victory. They had no idea the form had already been scanned, time-stamped, and auto-forwarded to a silent inbox monitored by a trust administrator in Idaho who didn't even own a television. He didn't care about TikToks or real estate Instagram posts. He cared about triggers, keywords, data, and uploads. When that form hit his folder, he would read the digital signature and note the execution timestamp. That timestamp was the key because it meant I could legally activate the clause. Activation required no court, no approval, just evidence, which I had, and a sealed affidavit, which was notarized, and an original trust agreement that predated her LLC formation by 6 months. All in place, all waiting. They laughed as I picked up my keys and stepped outside. I think one of her friends, the loud one with a fake laugh and 3 ex-husbands, even said something like, "Poor guy. Bet he'll be living in a condo off the interstate by next week." I didn't look back, but as I slid into my truck and started the engine, I remember glancing at the little bronze plaque she had nailed onto the front porch step last summer. It read, "Queen of this castle," and I remember thinking, with no sarcasm, no rage, not for long. The folder had been sitting there for 4 years, untouched, unbothered, unseen, wedged between old tax returns and the lease to a storage unit no one knew existed. I hadn't looked at it since I'd labeled it Contingency Plan 2021. During that strange winter, she'd started referring to me as the help at dinner parties. Back then, she'd been subtle. A jab here, a story told at my expense there. He's sweet, she'd say, just not ambitious. That's what she told her cousin from the city who visited once a year and left a trail of cologne strong enough to fumigate the guest linens. He's not a fighter, she'd said over gin and tonics. He's stable, she meant forgettable, and I never corrected her. I just started planning. The folder clicked open like a safety being released. Inside were 3 documents, clean, simple, efficient. The first was the activation form, signed by me and countersigned by the original trustee back when the trust was created. It bore a blue seal, embossed so deeply it had left a faint imprint on the next page. The second was an affidavit from a certified property investigator I'd hired after one of her little poolside influencer brunches. He documented non-permitted events, unauthorized business use of the property, and one particularly interesting invoice where she'd billed the HOA for a community networking session that featured 2 DJs, 3 exotic dancers, and a pop-up Botox bar, all while listing the home as a business asset on her LLC filings, despite having signed documents affirming its residential-only use per trust conditions. The third was one line, typed, dated, and signed in blue ink. Activate Clause 1 upon execution. Execution meant she had to sign, and she had, with her glitter pen, right before popping Risay and calling her followers queens. Now, I just had to make one call. Not a long one, no emotion, just a date and time. I picked up the phone, the burner line I'd kept for legal matters, and dialed the number that only rang once before being answered. Confirming for tomorrow, the voice said, calm and professional, 6:07 a.m. Eastern. I replied, confirm document timestamp, then initiate. No delay. Understood. Activation window secured. Execution order already on file with the clerk's office. You'll receive confirmation by 6:10. I hung up. No second thoughts. No heartbeat spike, just silence. I sat back, let the chair creak beneath me, and stared at the old dented file cabinet in the corner. The thing was ugly, a dent on the side from when I dropped it during the move. She'd begged me to throw it out, said it was depressing. I kept it. It was the only thing in the apartment that still had a cautionary label with her name on it. I poured a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, just like I used to drink it before she told me it made me look like a construction worker. A slow, invisible machine had just started turning. It wasn't dramatic, no thunder, no sirens, just clockwork, cold, silent, legal. At precisely 6:07 a.m. the next morning, a court clerk would receive a triggered filing with the pre-registered seal. The county recorder's office would log the reversion request and notify the trust administrator. A chain reaction, preloaded, pre-cleared, and irreversible, would begin. She would wake up in the house she thought she owned. She'd walk barefoot across the kitchen floor I tiled myself, sip espresso brewed from a machine I installed, and scroll through posts calling me spineless. And somewhere before her second scroll, her lawyer would open his email and see a subject line that would make him spill his coffee. Clause 1 activation filed 6 hours, 7 minutes, and 1 second. No alarms, no warning, just a machine that had been waiting for years to turn itself on. We were still pretending to be in love when we bought the place, or maybe I was pretending, and she was auditioning. The open houses were a parade of performances, hers mostly. She'd glide through kitchens like a realtor's dream, laughing, twirling, calling everything a vibe. I was the one comparing load-bearing walls and checking the attic insulation. She was checking if the backyard would look good with fairy lights and a fire pit for content shoots. It was the second house we toured that she wanted, the one with the slate patio and wraparound porch. I remember standing on the front step, hands in my pockets, while she whispered to the agent he'll cave. He always caves. She didn't know I heard. She didn't know a lot of things back then, but she was right. I did cave on the house, but not on the structure. Let's run it through a trust, I said casually 2 days later, flipping through the inspection report like it was nothing. Makes it easier for asset protection, fewer taxes, more flexibility if we ever want to refinance. She shrugged. Whatever gets us the house, just don't make it weird. So, I made it precise. I set up the trust through a small, private firm in Maine, quiet, discreet, no flashy marketing or social media presence, just a real office with real lawyers who liked Latin clauses and didn't ask questions when I said, include a reversionary override clause in case of misuse. What's the trigger? The attorney had asked. Use of property for personal financial gain at the grantor's direct expense, I said, plus any misrepresentation of contribution value for the purpose of public perception. She raised an eyebrow but nodded. Cold, she said. Clean, I replied. The trust documents were thick. We went through them in our old apartment, sitting at a folding table because the couch hadn't arrived yet. She skimmed. I read. She signed with her usual pink gel pen, the one with the heart-shaped cap, and initialed every page like she was checking off a grocery list. At page 22, she paused. What's this one mean? That if you turn the house into an Airbnb or launch a pyramid scheme from the living room, the ownership reverts. She laughed. You're so paranoid. It's just a house. I smiled. Exactly. Her lawyer, James, the one she picked because he looked like the guy from that legal drama, didn't even blink. The guy could barely stay awake through the closing. He glanced at the binder, asked if we wanted espresso, and said, "Looks boilerplate to me." I thanked him, shook his hand, and filed the originals myself. Over the years, she forgot the trust existed, forgot what she signed. Or maybe she never cared enough to remember. That's the thing about people who think they're playing you. They never imagine you're 10 moves ahead because they can't picture you caring enough to bother. But I did. I remembered every clause, every definition, every safeguard. When she started calling the housers on Instagram, I took screenshots. When she claimed in a business interview that she secured the property with her own earnings, I saved the audio. When she hosted a Queen's brunch with tickets sold through her LLC and posted photos of 30 women lounging in our backyard while she made speeches about owning your space, I printed the event page. Every little moment of arrogance, every slip, every misstep, all of it was proof. And proof was power. She saw granite countertops and arched doorways. I saw legal triggers. She saw content opportunities. I saw violations. The clause was quiet, unassuming, but real. And now, thanks to her ego, her carelessness, and her refusal to believe I'd ever fight back, that clause was alive. She won the illusion. I built the trap. They lit sparklers on the back patio like it was the 4th of July, not the signing of a fraudulent monarchy. Plastic tiaras were handed out, glitter confetti cannons popped. A cheap Bluetooth speaker pumped out whatever empowerment anthem was trending that week. I watched it unfold from my phone screen. Her Instagram story was a parade of champagne flutes and fake laughter, all staged beneath string lights I installed myself when she wanted a fairy garden aesthetic for summer. "Queen of the castle," one of them shouted as she twirled in a white maxi dress like some influencer Cinderella. Except the castle, yeah. That was built with my money, my labor, and my name on every invoice she never bothered to read. But I didn't comment. I didn't text. I didn't correct the caption. "When he finally learns who wears the crown," she posted, with a photo of herself standing barefoot on the kitchen island, arms outstretched like she was blessing the peasants. The comments rolled in. "Yes, queen. Good for you, girl. Take what's yours. I always knew you'd outgrow him." Her friends, the ones who used to giggle politely when I brought wine to girls' night, were tagging each other under her post, laughing in DMs I wasn't supposed to see. But I did. One of them still had her iCloud linked to the wrong folder. And guess who got the weekly backup notification? They called me the placeholder. The guy before the upgrade, the dependable idiot who signed the deed because he still loved her. I read every word, ate cold pasta, and took notes. Not because I needed revenge in that moment. I already had it. They just didn't know. Because what the photo didn't show, what no amount of filters or emojis could reveal, was that while she danced around declaring herself queen, a legal trigger sat timestamped and sealed in a lawyer's inbox. Waiting for the moment her signature became more than symbolic. Waiting for 6:07 a.m. when the system we built, the system she never bothered to understand, would quietly begin its work. The transfer document had already been submitted to the county clerk's automated intake queue, pre-drafted and authorized for digital execution upon timestamp match. The activation order was synced. The trust administrator in Maine had been alerted of the trigger pending confirmation. At that moment, her crown was made of glitter glue. My silence was legal thunder in slow motion. But in her world, I was just the ex-husband who finally gave up. Just a man too spineless to fight. She toasted that narrative with Rasay. What struck me wasn't the betrayal. that had become routine, subtle digs, casual omissions, the slow erasure of my presence from her public life. No, what really hit was how confident she was that I couldn't outmaneuver her. She thought my calm meant defeat. She mistook my nod for permission. And that's the thing about liars who win loudly. They forget that the truth doesn't need volume. It needs time. They always celebrate too early. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through the tags, watching them celebrate my surrender. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't even surprised. I just stared at the screen and whispered, "One more sleep." Then I turned off the phone, checked the time, set my alarm for 5:50, and smiled, knowing that while they cheered their imagined victory, the machine had already started ticking. The crown she claimed was borrowed, and it was due back at sunrise. 6:07 a.m. James Lathrop was a creature of habit. He brewed the same overpriced Ethiopian blend each morning in his sleek countertop machine, checked the market news on his tablet, and skimmed through client emails before his second sip. Half the time, he didn't even read subject lines, just sorted, flagged, and forwarded. That morning, he was in pajama pants and a Henley, rubbing his temples, trying to remember if his ex-wife's alimony check had cleared. Then he saw it. Subject line, Clause 1, activation confirmed. Timestamp 6701. From Marston Private Trust. He blinked once, twice, then clicked. The email opened like a bomb going off in his chest. Attached were 4 documents. Attachment 1, the deed reversion certificate, legally notarized, certified with the original trust stamp bearing the Maine Secretary of State seal. Filed. Executed. Attachment 2, the affidavit of misuse, listing 10 clear violations of trust occupancy terms, complete with photo evidence, a time-stamped ledger of unauthorized events, and a cross-reference to county business filings under her LLC. Attachment 3, the activation directive, signed by me, dated years ago, pre-filed with conditional execution instructions, now triggered. Attachment 4, a court-stamped execution order, marked received and entered, listing the asset as reverted under trust authority and barring the transferee from further occupancy without express written consent. Lathrop's coffee hit the floor. He fumbled for his phone, still blinking as if the email would vanish. "This can't be right," he muttered, flipping open his laptop and yanking up the scanned agreement from the original house file. It was there. Page 1, second paragraph. Reversionary clause subject to grant or trigger. He'd seen it, initialed it, glossed over it. He had thought it was legal fluff, redundancy, overlawyered paranoia. Now it was a grenade, and it had already gone off. He hit her contact on speed dial. She didn't answer the first ring or the second. By the third, she finally picked up. "James," she groaned, her voice thick with sleep. "It's not even 7. He didn't wait. Page 1 of the agreement. Oh God. He just activated it. Silence. Then, "What are you talking about? He gave me the house." "No, Jenna, he gave you exactly what you asked for. He gave you the paper. But the house was under the trust. You remember the trust? That boring thing you called his little paperwork game?" She didn't reply. He triggered a conditional clause. "Everything is reverted. I just got the filing. It's airtight. There's nothing I can do." More silence. Then her voice, small, "But I signed it. We filed it." "Yes." And he waited. He sat on it like a goddamn rattlesnake. "Jenna, the moment you uploaded that social post claiming ownership, he had the misuse affidavit ready. The sale violations, the LLC filings, you used the property for gain. That's a direct breach. The system was automated. And the judge signed the execution order before sunrise." Another beat, then the sound of her moving fast, drawers opening, footsteps. She was checking for the deed. She was going to read it again, as if that would undo what she had already triggered. He could hear her breathing through the phone now, fast, shallow, the panic setting in. He imagined her pacing through the bedroom, barefoot on the hardwood, knocking over a wine glass from the night before. "You told me it was boilerplate," she hissed. "It wasn't. I didn't write the trust." "He did. You wanted the house. I rushed it. You told me to fast-track the closing. You said, just get me his signature. Well, congratulations. You got it. And now he has the house back. Legally, permanently. The clerk's stamp is already posted. She didn't cry. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, she was still flipping through papers, looking for an exit, and there wasn't one. Lathrop exhaled, staring at the digital seal on his screen. He rubbed his forehead with the heel of his hand. He played you, Jenna. He played both of us. Click. She hung up, but he stayed on the line, listening to nothing, staring at the email. He never even got to finish his coffee. By noon, the cracks were no longer theoretical. Her banking app refused to load the mortgage section, just spun endlessly before flashing an unfamiliar error code. She closed and reopened it. Still nothing. The line of credit tied to the house, the one she'd used to finance her brand relaunch and remodel the pool deck, now showed a red banner across the top. Account access suspended. Contact administrator. Administrator. She didn't understand. She was the homeowner. She'd signed the deed. The paperwork had been filed. James said it would be simple. He said the trust was background noise. But the background noise had just turned into a siren. Her email pinged at 12:03 p.m. It was from someone named Samuel Delmont, a trust administrator she'd never heard of. The subject line, breach notification, property financial activity suspended. She clicked it, hands trembling. Miss Aldridge, due to activation of Clause 1 within the governing trust instrument and in accordance with breach conditions identified under Article 5, all equity draws, mortgage modifications, and financial encumbrances related to the above-listed property are hereby suspended pending reallocation. Reversion has been recorded. Property status frozen. Any further attempt to engage with financial instruments tied to the asset may result in legal escalation under breach of trust conditions. Marston Private Trust, Admin Division. Niche reading. She didn't understand half the words anyway, but suspended pending reallocation. That she understood. She ran to the keypad by the front door and tried to disable the alarm before stepping out to the mailbox. The keypad beeped, flashed red, and then displayed a simple message. Code invalid. Account holder updated. What? She punched in the master code again. Same response. She backed away as if it might electrocute her. And then her phone buzzed again. This time it was her credit monitoring app, the one she downloaded during her influencer phase when she tried teaching financial independence in a video series that lasted 3 episodes. Your credit score dropped by 120 points today. Recent activity flagged. Property lien recorded. She dropped the phone on the kitchen island. The lien wasn't there yesterday. She checked. The equity line was her safety net, a 6-figure cushion she'd flaunted like a designer handbag. She was going to use it for the winter rebranding campaign. She had a new content strategist lined up, sponsors on the hook. Gone. The funds were gone. The leverage was gone. The asset was no longer hers. She made the call with shaking hands. Her father answered on the second ring. He sounded tired, like he'd been expecting the call all morning. "Daddy," she said, her voice cracking. He tricked me." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "No, he didn't." She froze. "He told you," her father continued. "He warned you. When you two got married, he gave you that binder. Remember? I told you to read it. You said it was just his weird finance hobby. I told you not to antagonize a man who thinks 3 moves ahead. But you couldn't help yourself, could you? You thought you were the clever one. You turned that house into a stage, Jenna. You mocked him publicly and you thought he wouldn't retaliate. But sweetheart," he sighed, "this is what happens when you marry someone smarter than you think." She sat on the edge of the couch, staring blankly at the flashing light on the alarm panel. "I don't even know the new code," she whispered. "Of course you don't," her father said. "Because it's not yours anymore." Then he hung up, and she was alone in the house she no longer owned, with locks she couldn't control and an account balance she could no longer touch. She showed up at my apartment just after 9:00 p.m. wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big and shoes that didn't match. No lipstick, no phone glued to her hand, not even her usual cloud of perfume, just the faint trace of whatever anxiety smells like when it soaks through cotton. The woman who once posted 3 outfit selfies before noon was now standing outside my door, hunched in on herself, knocking like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. I didn't say anything at first, just opened the door and waited. Her eyes flicked around the hallway behind me like she expected cameras or company. Maybe she thought this was some elaborate humiliation trap. Maybe she hoped it was. That would have made me petty, impulsive, more her speed. But there was no audience, no monologue waiting. Just me, calm, still. "Can I come in?" she asked. I didn't move. She took a breath and tried again, this time softer. "Please." I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, looking around like it was a museum of her past mistakes. I hadn't changed anything. Same couch she helped pick out when we moved in together. Same framed photo of her mother on the bookshelf. The mug she once said looked like a sad potato still sat in the dish rack. Funny how little I needed to forget her. She sat on the edge of the couch as if it might bite. "Why would you do this?" she asked finally. "You gave me the house." I tilted my head. "No," I said quietly. "I gave you a page with your name on it. What you did after that triggered everything else." She blinked as if she hadn't really heard me. "Don't be cryptic, please," she said, her voice rising. "You know exactly what you did. You tricked me." I let the silence stretch. "You didn't even warn me," she snapped. "You wanted it to be easy, so I made it easy. I trusted you," she said, her voice cracking like she was still playing the part of the wounded party. "No," I said, "you trusted that I'd never read the fine print." That shut her up. She stared at her hands for a long time, then gave a dry, humorless laugh. "I mean, it's genius, really. The trust, the clause, the automation. I didn't even see it coming. James didn't. My dad didn't. None of us did. You weren't supposed to," I said. She looked up. Her eyes weren't wet yet, but they were getting there. "You were always the one I could rely on. The safe bet. The guy who'd fix things, forgive things. You thought being underestimated was a personality flaw," I said. "It's not. It's a strategy." She stood up suddenly, pacing now as if movement could help her make sense of it. "You didn't have to ruin me." "I didn't," I said, meeting her eyes. "You did that just fine on your own." She froze. "You know," she said, her voice lower now, as if she were trying a different tactic. "We had good years. Don't you remember that?" I nodded. "I remember all of it. That's why I wrote the clause." That hit her harder than anything else I'd said. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. She took a step forward, reaching as if she might touch my arm. I stepped back. She let her hand fall, then whispered, almost to herself, "You really don't care anymore, do you?" "I care," I said. "I just don't belong to you anymore." And then I walked to the door and opened it. She stood there just inside the threshold, waiting for some final line, a scrap of apology, a thread to pull. There wasn't one. "You planned this," she whispered, "from the beginning." "No," I said. "From the middle. After I realized you were playing a game I didn't want to be in, I decided I had to finish it. And I closed the door. No slam, no drama, just a quiet click. And her, alone on the other side, still hoping that a conversation could undo a contract. The knock came at 8:12 a.m. She thought it was a delivery, maybe something from her endless parade of online impulse orders. Instead, it was a man in uniform holding a clipboard and a small envelope with an official red seal. He didn't smile, didn't speak more than he had to. "Certified notice, ma'am," he said, and had her sign. Then he left. Inside was a single letter, crisp and printed on the kind of thick, linen-textured paper that always signals something expensive and final. She read the first line, standing barefoot in the foyer. Per Section 9 of the Conditional Property Trust, you are hereby instructed to vacate the premises located at address redacted within 72 hours of this notice. Continued occupancy beyond this window constitutes unlawful trespass under applicable trust enforcement statutes. She reread it twice before noticing the second sheet, a separate document signed by the county sheriff's office. Notice of Trust Enforcement Action, Reversion Order #2467B. Occupant, Jenna Aldridge. Status, unauthorized. Time remaining for voluntary vacate, 71 hours, 47 minutes, and 32 seconds and counting. A countdown. It even had a countdown. She dropped the letter as if it had burned her. She ran to her phone. James didn't answer, sent her to voicemail. She tried another lawyer, someone she'd gone to school with who now handled high-net-worth divorce cases. He answered. She explained, rambling through clauses and trust language she didn't understand. He listened, then asked her to send the documents. She did. 10 minutes passed. Then the reply came, short, brutal. This isn't a bluff. It's enforceable. You signed the transfer document, which activated reversion under a private trust. You breached occupancy terms. There's no injunctive relief without a strong fraud claim, and you don't have one. My advice, start packing. She stood in the kitchen for a long time after that, blinking at the stove as if it might explain something. Then she called her mother. Her mother cried. Her father didn't even pick up. She tried a third lawyer and a fourth. Both told her the same thing in different words. The papers were legitimate. The trust structure was airtight. The timeline was already logged with the court. The reversion had been filed, executed, and entered into public record. You're living in a house you no longer own, the last one said. If you don't leave, the sheriff has legal authority to remove you by force. It's my house, she shouted. No, the lawyer said gently. It was. But now it's a trust asset, and you're a violator of its terms. She didn't cry yet. Not fully. Her body hadn't caught up with her mind. She hung up, sat on the bottom stair, and looked around. The walls were still painted the color she picked, the curtains still tied back the way she liked. Her wine fridge hummed softly, filled with bottles she'd ordered to celebrate her new life. But now, every square foot of it was evidence against her. Every throw pillow, someone else's property. Every piece of furniture, technically part of the estate inventory. The reversion clause included a lockout provision. She didn't even know what that meant until the lawyer explained that in 72 hours, the locks would change automatically. Her smart home system would be scrubbed, her garage code deactivated, even the mailbox key invalidated. She tried calling her realtor, the one who'd helped her stage a listing for the house before I signed it over. Yes, that's right. She was already planning to sell it and pocket the profit. The realtor answered nervously. I saw the filing, she said. Look, I don't want to get involved in legal stuff. You need to settle this before we go to market. There is no market anymore, Jenna snapped. I know, the realtor said. That's why I'm advising you to pack. She threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall, bounced off the hardwood, and cracked. For a second, she just stood there, breathing through her teeth. Then, with shaky hands, she opened her notes app and made a list. Call movers. Cancel content shoot. Reschedule sponsorships. Find storage unit. Check hotels. But halfway through writing check hotels, she stopped, stared at the screen, and finally cried. Not because of the house, but because it never once occurred to her that I would fight her with silence, and that silence would win. She thought the house would sit empty, a shrine to what she had lost. That maybe, somehow, I'd let it rot. That no one would touch the walls she curated or walk on the imported tile she filmed her morning coffee rituals on. She told a friend, one of the few still answering her calls, that he probably can't sell it anyway, not without taking a loss. She said it like a prayer. Like the worst I could do to her was not make money. She didn't know I had already sold it. Quietly, without an open house, no signs, no showings, no Instagram posts, just a clean, silent transaction recorded under the name of a private foundation she'd never bothered to ask me about. A line item in her ignorance. She'd seen the initials before on a plaque in my office, on an envelope once, but never thought to ask what they stood for. WVC Foundation, Walter Vincent Callahan. My grandfather, a Navy machinist turned electrical engineer who raised me after my father died. He taught me how to weld, how to think in systems, and most importantly, how to stay very quiet when people think they're smarter than you. 3 years ago, I used part of my inheritance to fund the nonprofit. The charter was simple: assist with housing solutions for disabled veterans. I built it under a donor-advised trust with full purchasing authority and legal discretion tied to the Marston Asset Group. When the clause triggered and the house reverted to trust control, the path was already paved. The buyer was pre-identified, the funds pre-allocated, the sale executed within 6 business days. Cash. No financing delays, no inspections, just a wire transfer and a change of title. I got the confirmation email while sipping tea on my balcony. I didn't even smile, just deleted the notification and archived the transaction. She found out the next morning when her old realtor sent her the listing closure. Wait, who bought it? She texted, eyes wide. She Googled the name, scrolled past the legal jargon and tax filings, and finally landed on a photo from a ribbon-cutting ceremony a year earlier. Me, standing in front of a renovated triplex with 3 veterans smiling behind me. The caption: WVC Foundation continues expansion with another property dedicated to transitional housing. It hit her like ice, because that house, the one she claimed on social media as her manifested dream, was now a designated property for veterans and their families. Her granite countertops were going to a retired staff sergeant who lost a leg in Fallujah. Her walk-in closet was slated for a storage space to hold donated winter coats. She called her lawyer. I want to contest the sale. You can't, he said. You were removed from the chain of title before it closed. You were notified. You didn't respond. It's done. It was my house, she hissed. No, he said. It was never yours. You just lived in it. Briefly, she tried to argue something about sentimental value, about how the house was tied to her image, how her brand revolved around it. But James, the same lawyer who once called me a nice guy with no killer instinct, wasn't soft anymore. You humiliated him, he said, and he didn't yell. He just waited. She drove by once, saw the moving truck, watched as volunteers carried in beds, bedding, and supplies. No one recognized her. One of the women directing the move smiled at her as if she were just another neighbor. She didn't respond. The foundation had no interest in glamour, no signage, no announcements, just quiet efficiency. It was over. She posted one last Instagram story, a blurry photo of a martini, a cryptic caption: lost more than I thought, learned more than I wanted. She didn't tag anyone because there was no one left to tag. The house was gone. But worse than that, so was her status. She couldn't lie about it, couldn't rebuild around it. She couldn't even pretend it was stolen because technically, it had never been hers. And now it belonged to people who didn't care about followers or filters, people who didn't need an audience to deserve a home. And her. She was just a cautionary tale in a transaction that didn't even have her name on the receipt. The text came through just as I cracked the eggs into the skillet. It was from David, my old neighbor across the street. She's screaming at the movers. Loud, like a real, full-volume meltdown. Her dad just pulled up in that old Lincoln, got out, red-faced. The whole block heard him yell, "He warned you and you laughed. It's bad." I put the phone down, stirred the yolks, and sprinkled a little pepper. Nothing fancy. Just enough to remind myself that quiet doesn't mean weak. By the time the toast popped, 3 more texts had come in. One was from the HOA secretary, an older woman who used to adore my ex. She said the new owners had been greeted warmly, asked if they needed anything. She said she hoped we'd be seeing more families like that moving in. She didn't mention Jenna. She didn't need to, because Jenna's name was already falling out of circulation. The social climb she used to orchestrate with brunches, business cards, and Queen Energy hashtags was eroding faster than her last spray tan. People weren't taking sides. They were just erasing the memory. Her empire of perception collapsed in silence. No smear campaign, no scandal, just absence. But something still made noise, like that final, operatic breakdown on the front lawn. The movers she'd contracted, not her usual Instagram-friendly concierge relocation team, were just doing their jobs. Box by box, they carried out the curated life she had built inside someone else's legal framework. I was told she tried to stop them, that she shouted about theft, screamed about wrongful eviction, even grabbed one of the boxes marked guest bath and hurled it into the driveway. The box broke open. Candles, towels, one of those novelty signs she once bought that said, "Good vibes only." Her father arrived mid-scene, parked diagonally like he didn't care anymore. He slammed the door, yelled her full name, middle name included. "You were warned," he shouted. "He gave you the rules and you laughed. You thought you were above consequences." I'm told she didn't reply, just stood there in pajama pants and designer slippers, mascara from 2 nights ago still clinging to the corners of her eyes, watching her curated life disappear into the back of a nondescript moving truck. She didn't even try to film it, didn't call her followers babes or warriors or healing queens. She just watched, silenced by something heavier than shame. Me. I folded the omelet, poured coffee, opened my laptop, and created a new folder labeled Florida Properties, Next Steps. Because while she was screaming into the void of her own hubris, I had already moved on, not just from the house, but from her version of reality, the one where loud wins, where flair substitutes for competence, where the fine print is just a blur between spa appointments. She used to say, "You're so calm, it's annoying." That was the last part she never understood. Calm doesn't mean surrender. Calm means control. And control means you don't have to shout to win. She lost everything thinking volume was power. I gained everything knowing silence was strategy. By the time the sheriff returned for a final inspection, she was gone. No goodbye, no last threat, no apology. Just an empty driveway, a changed keypad, and a name on the deed that had never stopped being mine. I took another bite of my breakfast and smiled.